Joshua 23. After a long time had passed and the Lord had given Israel rest from all their enemies around them, Joshua, by then a very old man, summoned all Israel, their leaders, judges, their elders, leaders, judges, and officials, and said to them, I'm very old. You yourselves have seen everything the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. It was the Lord your God who fought for you. Remember how I have allotted as an inheritance for your tribes all the land of the nations that remain, the nations I conquered between the Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea in the west. The Lord your God himself will push them out for your sake. He will drive them out before you, and you will take possession of their land, as the Lord your God promised you. Be very strong. Be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, without turning aside to the right or to the left. Do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not invoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them. But you are to hold fast to the Lord your God as you have until now. The Lord has driven out before you great and powerful nations. I want to say something actually about this. Not serving other gods. I know that many of you are on social media. And when you are on social media or even YouTube, I've had this issue myself. You start to want to peek at what the world is doing. It's easy when you're going through something and you're going through something emotional and you want to kind of like distract yourself, because that's what we want to do when we're going through something emotional. No one is like, oh, yay, let me feel my feelings. But it's exactly what you need to do, and you need to stay in God, and you cannot go and start peeking at what the world is doing. You can't go see what that celebrity's doing or what that person is doing. You just can't do it, because you start to ingest the food that they eat. You start to make a justification that you're somehow separate, but you're just peeking right now. And in peeking, you start to ingest that. I can assure you that God's kingdom is not on Facebook. God's kingdom is not on YouTube. God's kingdom is not on Twitter or whatever other social media. I don't even know very much about social media anymore. My daughter makes fun of me because I ask her about TikTok. Oh, are you on that TikTok thing? And she laughs at me. She's like, I don't know why you ask me that all the time. But I was once upon a time on Facebook, and now I have the channel on YouTube. And so as I'm loading things on YouTube, loading videos on YouTube, it can be very easy for me to go and, oh, let me just go see this. Let me see that. You have all these pop-ups and, things that are coming in your news feed. That God's people need not be around that. We have to be very, very regimented about what it is that we expose ourselves to. I know that this is going to sound like it's a little extra or maybe a little extreme, but I'm telling you, this is what God's been speaking to me the last couple days, actually for the last few weeks. No, technically the last few months, all right. So he's really been driving it home the last few days, okay? That we have to be clean. We have to be clean. We cannot expose ourselves to the things that the world exposes themselves to, and it's very difficult for us. Think about this. It was hard enough for them being in their own land and being separated. We're among the nations. Like, we're living in those nations right now, trying to live in a way that is separate from other nations. It's very difficult. It might be a little bit easier if all of us were living in Jerusalem. We were all living in one town and we could reaffirm and everything else. And so it's really important that we assemble all the more as we see the day approaching. It's really important that we remain connected to the people of God. So those of you on the channel who are not making a decision to assemble with the body, which is most of you, how are you doing that? How are you doing that? How do you think that you're going to stay in God when you're out there in the world among the nations and you're not assembling with the people of God? Guys, you've got to be doing that. Not because I say, but because the word says. How are you going to hold yourself accountable? How are others going to have the opportunity to hold you accountable? And how are you going to live out your covenant to hold them accountable? How are you going to do this just by yourself? God has not designed you to do that. He has made you part of a body to whom you have responsibility, and they have responsibility to you. So I want you to think about that, because the Israelites were not just concerned about themselves, and the leaders were not concerned about themselves. They were caring for the flock. Look at to their dying day. What did Moses do? What did Joshua do? They're reminding the Israelites, don't do these things. Make sure that you are careful to obey everything the Lord has said, or you're not going to keep this. You're going to be destroyed. That's the heart you're supposed to have. Are you having that heart? Because I can see that most of you do not. The reason I can see that is because you don't make an attempt to assemble with the body. I'm afraid that many of you think that you're justified because you're listening to some YouTube channels, but you're not applying what the word says. and you're not applying the warnings that I'm giving you. How can you make it? You have a responsibility to the body, and they have a responsibility to you. That's why I'm warning you right now. Get off your social media, and maybe you'll have some time to assemble with the body. Get off your social media because you are ingesting the world when you're scrolling through, and you don't even realize the ways that you're defiling yourself. Verse 7, do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not invoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them, but you are to hold fast to the Lord your God as you have until now. Now, let me just throw some things out. These are, I know that these are so commonplace that you're probably going to think I'm being nuts. Insurance, 401k, IRA, investments. What does God have to do with any of these things, guys? If you're living in Him, why would you need insurance for everything? Obviously, it's the law. We have to follow the law. So if there are certain insurance, we have to get car insurance and we have to get homeowners insurance. But I'm talking about going beyond that. God is the one who provides for us. And you see what's happening with insurance companies? They won't even cover the claims that are being made right now through so-called natural disasters because God is sending those disasters. They're not natural disasters. Mother Nature, whoever that is not sending them. God is sending them. And He's teaching people to stop relying on making a lie their refuge. What does God have to do with these things? He told us He would not send those things. And so if He's sending those things and you have insurance to cover you, believe me, He'll send something bigger. He's going to send things compensatory to what He's teaching you. So your stockpiling, your investments, your backup plan for God, these are false gods. God didn't tell you to do any of these things. He did not tell you to sit on prepper channels all day. He said, don't store up these things. That's what the pagans do. You're supposed to be relying on Him, and you're supposed to be paying attention to when He's dealing with you in subtle ways so He doesn't have to bring bigger ways. The Lord has driven out before you great and powerful nations. To this day, no one's been able to withstand you. One of you routs 1,000 because the Lord your God fights for you, just as He promised. So be very careful to love the Lord your God. But if you turn away and ally yourselves with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, and you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you will be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your backs and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. Now I am about to go the way of all the earth. You know with all your heart and soul that not one of all the good promises the Lord your God gave you has failed. Every promise has been fulfilled, not one has failed. But just as all the good things the Lord your God has promised you have come to you, so He will bring on you all the evil things He has threatened, until the Lord your God has destroyed you from this good land He has given you. If you violate the covenant of the Lord your God, which He commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, the Lord's anger will burn against you, and you will quickly perish from the good land He's given you. So here's the thing I ask you. Do you take this seriously? Because everybody's all about it when God calls them in and He's speaking tenderly to you and He's wooing you in, and you're like, oh, I just love Jesus, 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 I just love Him. But then He starts to require of us, and things get hard, and He requires us to suffer, because that's what He says in His word, that we're going to suffer for His name. And He starts to show us the ways in which we're going to suffer for His name. And, oh, that's different, huh? But we need to be faithful to Him just as He's been faithful to us. And we need to remember that we're being cleaned up. That is our covenant right now. We're being cleaned up. And we're working out our salvation. And the word says that we're being purified, made spotless, and refined. And the way that you do that is to go through the fire. And Peter said, don't be surprised about the fiery trial that's come on you, because judgment has begun with God's people. So you have to expect these things without turning away from God. And it's not easy. It's really hard. It's hard to maintain that faith that He's going to be faithful when you see that He's also concurrently dealing with you. But you're going to have to work yourself into the perspective of loving God's discipline and receiving God's discipline, not turning away from it, because the best way to get more discipline is to turn away from it, and then He's going to have to get louder. Then Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. He summoned the elders, leaders, judges, and officials of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. Joshua said to all the people, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him throughout Canaan and gave him many descendants. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I assigned the hill country of Seir to Esau, but Jacob and his family went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I afflicted the Egyptians by what I did there, and I brought you out. When I brought your people out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued them with chariots and horsemen as far as the Red Sea. But they cried out to the Lord for help, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. He brought the sea over them and covered them. You saw with your own eyes what I did to the Egyptians. Then you lived in the wilderness for a long time. I brought you to the land of the Amorites who lived east of the Jordan. They fought against you, but I gave them into your hands. I destroyed them from before you, and you took possession of their land. When Balak, son of Zippor, the king of Moab, prepared to fight against Israel, he sent for Balaam, son of Beor, to put a curse on you. But I would not listen to Balaam, so he blessed you again and again, and I delivered you out of his hand. Okay, pay attention to that. I would not listen to Balaam, okay? So no one's going to put a curse on you without God's hand. If you are receiving certain things, then you're going to get a curse. But no one should be saying someone's doing voodoo on you. That's ridiculous. It's not true. It's not biblical. The only one who ever sends curses in the Bible is God. You can see that whoever this is, but I would not listen to Balaam, so he blessed you again and again, and I delivered you out of his hand. He was trying to put a curse on the people, but God would not listen to him. The implication is he appealed to God, and God would not do it. Then you crossed the Jordan and came to Jericho. The citizens of Jericho fought against you, as did also the Amorites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hittites, Girgashites, Hivites, and Jebusites, but I gave them into your hands. I sent the hornet ahead of you, which drove them out before you, also the 2 Amorite kings. You did not do it with your own sword and bow. So I gave you a land on which you did not toil, and cities you did not build. And you live in them, and eat from their vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. Now fear the Lord, and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Then the people answered, Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods. It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our parents up out of Egypt from the land of slavery and performed those great signs before our eyes. He protected us on our entire journey and among all the nations through which we traveled. And the Lord drove out before us all the nations, including the Amorites who lived in the land. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God. Joshua said to the people, You are not able to serve the Lord. He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion and your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you. Don't take him for granted. Just because he's been good to you, don't think that he will not do these things. Because Joshua just said it right there. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you. But the people said to Joshua, No, we will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said, You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord. Yes, we are witnesses, they replied. Now then, said Joshua, throw away the foreign gods that are among you and yield your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, We will serve the Lord our God and obey him. On that day, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem he reaffirmed for them decrees and laws. And Joshua recorded these things in the book of the law of God. Then he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak, near the holy place of the Lord. See, he said to all the people, This stone will be a witness against us. It has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God. Then Joshua dismissed the people, each to their own inheritance. After these things, Joshua son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him in the land of his inheritance, in Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gash. All right, Timnath-Serah, also known as Timnath-Heres. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him and who had experienced everything the Lord had done for Israel. And Joseph's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the tract of land that Jacob bought for 100 pieces of silver from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. This became the inheritance of Joseph's descendants. And Eleazar, son of Aaron, died and was buried at Gibeah, which had been allotted to his son Phinehas in the hill country of Ephraim. All right, that's the end of the book of Joshua. I'm glad that we got to read that because I really did want to understand all that God did for the Israelites as they were, once they did cross over the Jordan. You can also feel free to read a little bit more about crossing over the Jordan. There's more written in the book of Judges. Some of the things I'm considering right now have to do with, what the faithfulness looks like, and how it actually is not super easy to meet that criteria of faithfulness, especially living, in the world that we live in right now, scattered among the nations. It's very difficult. And so we have to implement certain structures to make sure that we're being vigilant about keeping ourselves protected from ingesting the food of the world, the doctrines of the world, the gods of this world, and defiling ourselves by connecting or peeking at what the world is doing. Because when we're peeking, we're connecting with the world. So we're defiling ourselves. There's no way to peek at what the world is doing and still be clean. So I'm really struck by this, and it's really on my heart because it's something that God has been talking to me about, particularly in the last couple days, that we have to remain vigilant. We have to be in a perpetual fast. We have to make sure that we're always connected to Him and always living in the Spirit, because the minute we separate from Him, we're in trouble. So if we're trying to hide our faces, or we think like, oh, well, God will let me take this break from Him for a minute, it's not going to work. We've turned away from Him. Why would we take a break from God? We're hiding our faces from Him. I want to remind you of that statement in Joshua 24, verse 20. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, He will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after He has been good to you. After He has been good to you. No one should take for granted that He has already called you and it's a done deal. Many are called, but few are chosen. And I want to tell you something that I'm looking at right now. I'm on Bible Gateway, and I'm trying to read the Bible. And to the left of the Bible, do you know what's there? Harry Potter. An ad for Harry Potter. That's how easy it is. That's how easy it is. You go on your computer, and to the left, you've got witchcraft and sorcery while you're trying to read God's Word. I mean, everybody has sold out. They got images of the cross, Christmas, Easter. They call these things Christian. You mean to tell me that Bible Gateway can't select what ads are popping up, or have they sold out? That is so disgusting. That's how easy it is. Why should we not be able to sit down and read the Word without all these pop-ups, this defiled food popping up? It's just terrible. And then this so-called symbol of Christianity, which is an image, the image of the cross to Tammuz, on every so-called Christian site. You see what I'm saying, guys? It's that simple. It's that easy. We have to be vigilant. We have to keep ourselves accountable and circumcised to God, consecrated. Please discern this message with God.